Hi, folks. Welcome, everybody. And it's great to be here today. I'm with an incredible lineup of expertise and experience on all things diaspora youth and diaspora youth engagement. My name is Dr. Martin Russell. I'm the moderator for the session, and some of you know me already, and some of you know this accent. So I'm going to speak as little as possible over the next 45 minutes. But, you know, it's wonderful to be here and to congratulate Germin and the Global Albanian Foundation on the launch of their original program and project. I think it's an incredible time. And when people ask us why now for diaspora youth and diaspora youth engagement, I think having traveled the world working on this topic, something that we hear again and again is how do we make sure that the next generation and the generations after them have that sense of belonging to where we all come from. So I think what's really been interesting over the last 12 to 18 months, it's been an emotional time for the world, if we're being honest. And I think what it has done for a lot of us is to begin to ask those questions of who am I, where am I from, and what's my legacy? So what's exciting is that I think the program comes at the perfect time. And as we often say in diaspora engagement, it's about experience and having a little bit of fun as well. So I think these programs naturally align to that type of engagement. So what I want to say is a huge well done, a huge thank you, and let's get to it. So we have three incredible speakers with us. First, we have Mike, who's going to share some experience from the Jewish side of the community and engagement and how they've gone about it. And then we have two very dear friends from Armenia to share their world-leading work in this area. So Mike, I'm going to mute. The floor is yours and take it from here.
Thank you very much, Martin. And it's a great pleasure to be again involved with German and the Albanian diaspora. It's my second time, and I always feel honored. And really, it's a great pleasure to assist this developing and emerging diaspora, which has really understood the importance and is taking important steps to move it ahead. So today we're talking about the young generation. And I worked for 22 years for a philanthropic organization, one of the biggest in the world, which is based in Israel, and fundraisers from the Jewish diaspora. It's an organization that's been around for 100 years. And what's special about it, it's called Keren Yesod United Israel Appeal. What's special about it is in 100 years, it hasn't changed its mandate. Mandate has always been to raise funds to support different causes within Israel and for the Jewish people. And it's always worked with Jewish communities around the world. And I did many, many different things there. And I've got to know very well the whole dynamics of development of diaspora, how to create the connections, and how to make sure that there's continuity. And I think that's what we're talking about today. Because the whole issue of the next generation or young leadership, or there are all kinds of different names that are given to this group of people, which I'll try and define in a second, is that everyone understands that it's crucial. It's way beyond important. Because without a lot of hard work focused on the second, third, in some cases the fourth generation, nothing will happen and the whole thing will disintegrate. Because you need them to be engaged at different levels in order to create some sort of continuity. So on the one hand, everyone understands it's crucial. On the other hand, everyone understands it's not easy. It's a very difficult challenge to engage young people, younger people, again, especially as time goes by, for all kinds of different reasons. It's always been a challenge, and I think during these times, it's with this sort of different generation that we're dealing with, it's become even more so. And the third factor is every diaspora organization knows it's not doing enough. So we're trying to balance between the importance, how crucial it is, the fact that it's not easy, and the fact that every diaspora organization understands that they have to devote much more resources to that segment of the population, and everyone doesn't do enough in it, because you can do so much and still not progress as much as you wanted. So it's a big challenge. It's a great challenge, very important, and I think there's a lot to be learned from our shared experiences. Now, Israel and the Jewish diaspora is an interesting case. I won't go into analyzing the long history of it, but I think it's identified by a few special elements that we can all learn from. So first of all, the interesting thing about it is the fact that also locally in each Jewish community around the world, and I work with over 60 countries and 9 languages, different communities in different places, but in all of them, they were in trying to engage the young generation in their own local establishments, in their own local, what we would call diaspora organizations. So we started with a very strong foundation locally and a great concern for the young generation. But locally, they do that. Then there's the whole issue of connecting to Israel. And how do we make sure that that connection is meaningful? And as Martin said, there's all kinds of elements of it, fun and interest and emotion and meaning and so forth. And how do we engage them into into this special relationship between the diaspora and what we would call some sort of a homeland, a spiritual homeland, ancestral homeland. Because again, we're talking about generations after the people have left. So we were working both on a local level, the international connection, and using those two platforms together is a good place to start and make progress. Now, when we talk about young generation or next generation or young people, I think we can try and look at 3 different segments of the population. First of all, there's the under 18 high school students and even younger. And as we all know, with education, with heritage, with passing on some sort of connection, it's the earlier you start, the better. But again, that's not easy. The younger the generation is, it's not easy. But we have to think about that as well and not put it aside. You can start at any age you want, but that's a group that has to be given some attention. Then there's the whole student age, which I would include the gap year and the years of study, which is a very, very important stage in people creating their own identity, as Martin said. Who am I? Where do I come from? Who do I belong to? Which community I associate with? And then I would define a third group of people. And the reason I'm breaking it down, because each group needs to be addressed a bit differently, but they all need to be addressed, in my understanding, if you have the resources. The third group is, I would call it the 25 to the 35, when people are already starting to create their careers, their families, they're finding their partner, they're starting to have young children of their own. So those are the 3 groups, because after 35, regretfully, we can't call ourselves young anymore. So I would look at those 3 groups and try and see how I can bring my content, my connection, my desire to get people engaged at each level. It depends on the amount of resources you have and the sort of platform you can utilize to get to them. But those 3 groups definitely need attention. Another element that needs to be brought into account is the fact that I don't know if it's a generational thing. I think it identifies a lot of people. But when you connect with this group of people in all 3 ages, but definitely at the student age and the 25 to 35, there's an element of what's in it for me. I mean, we'd be very happy if everybody would engage with the diaspora based on what they received at home, or just some sort of ideological or emotional or religious, whatever it is, connection to your own heritage. But we all know it's not necessarily the case. Hence, any approach that we take to engage these young people into our network has to have an element of giving back to them. We're engaging them in such a way that they realize what's in it for them. It's not a cynical thing, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. We are all motivated by different things. But with this generation, you have to think in terms of what they want to achieve, where they want to, because they're building themselves career-wise, family-wise, identity-wise, and you need to try and tap into those motivations to create a successful diaspora engagement. So I want to give, in the few more minutes that I have, 4 examples of programs that I know I've experienced, either ran them or was a partner to running them, that were very, very successful. And then I want to conclude with the biggest challenge of all. And I'll leave that for the end. So the 4 programs I want to relate to refer to the 3 groups that I was speaking of. So I want to start with the children. And this is a program that I began. I started my career in diaspora engagement in Sydney, Australia. There's a Jewish community there. And I was thinking, how can I engage the younger generation, the children at school? And in many places around the world, again, I'm talking about the local, they're Jewish schools, and kids go to them, naturally. And what I did was I engaged the high schools in a program which related to family trees. And we family tree program, and I took auspices of it, the diaspora organization that I was representing. We took it under our auspices, and we started to run it as our program. And people wrote about their family tree, and we gave them all kinds of materials, and it went, of course, all the way back to their connection to the homeland. Again, in the case of the Jews, but this idea of that our history, our heritage begins with our grandparents, our great-grandparents, the place that our ancestors came from. It was a small seed that we started, but it was very, very successful. It got also the parents involved, the kids, the grandparents. It turned into a whole big family affair. It doesn't require a lot of resources, but it's a very strong first connection. And it already began creating that connection from a younger age where people identify connection to the diaspora through this sort of exercise. And again, a lot of schools do it. Family trees, family heritage, lineage is all part of school programs. It's just a matter of connecting it to the diaspora organization. That's one example. The second example, of course, is Birthright. Birthright is an Israeli invention, a highly successful program. It's already become a brand, and I know that you're about to talk about it, and also the Albanian community is talking about it, and for good reason. It's a very, very successful program. It's extremely demanding resource-wise, because as I'm sure you may have heard, the whole idea of Birthright is that it's a free program. The participants don't pay anything for a 10-day trip to Israel. Flights included, full board, their whole stay here. They have a wonderful experience. I've met a lot of young people who said it was the best experience of their lives. But of course, it demands a lot of resources. And Birthright has developed. There have been hundreds of thousands already who attended the program from all around the world. They come here. They're introduced to the country. It's not means tested. So basically, anybody can. The whole idea was to create a bureaucracy-free engagement program. So you just register, you have to prove some sort of connection, and you're on the next plane to Israel. It's 10 days. They experience every element of Israel. There are all kinds of specialized programs. Again, if there are any questions, I can answer, but there are programs that focus on high-tech, on culinary, on different business enterprises. So there are all kinds of ways to invest. And a wonderful way to start for the student age or gap year age, 18 to 25, to get people to the first taste of the diaspora engagement. It's been running for several years now. There's a lot of government money involved, philanthropic money involved. It's a big, big enterprise. So very resource demanding. The third program I want to relate to is called Masa. Masa in Hebrew is journey. And it was created as a continuity program to Birthright. Now, if Birthright is 10 days, Masa is already 3 to 4 months and sometimes up to a year, where young people during their student years or even after come to Israel under the auspices of a well-run program. Naturally, it's not as intensive as the 10-day Birthright, but here it's much, much more tailor-made. And we offer them all kinds of different experiences and job opportunities and networking opportunities where they can really develop a connection, both on an identity level, but also for their careers. So, for example, there's an internship in the foreign ministry. So people come, they work for the foreign ministry for 6 months in different positions, work in different high-tech companies. they can do arts for 6 months or for a year. This program is subsidized. It's not free. It's a bit more financially viable, but naturally it creates a much, much stronger connection because you come and you manage to both experience the country for a longer period of time and create connections. And the fourth program I want to relate to has to do with philanthropy, because I believe that one of the best ways to engage any sort of diaspora and also young people is through philanthropy, because philanthropy connects people on an emotional level, and there's a whole big story behind it, and I think we can all agree about it, but it's one way of doing it. And what we did to engage young people, we do a lot of things to engage young people. Again, 25 to 35, that's the age group I'm relating to, is have programs which relate to philanthropy at their level and engage them in giving to projects in Israel. And one of the things we did, it was called a forum, is a very, very intensive 3-day program at a very, very high level for people who want to get engaged in supporting programs in Israel at a higher level. We brought them for 3.5 days, and we offered them from the prime minister and the president all the way down to all kinds of different experiences, very intensive. And from that, we created a pool of people who together engaged in philanthropic giving from all around the world. So I gave you sort of 4 examples that relate to different age groups, but with all in the same framework of how to engage, and each relate to what I would call the 3 reasons why young people will get involved in any sort of diaspora organization. One is to create a network, preferably international. Young people understand it, relate to it, and through diaspora they can do it. The second is to have an experience, and Martin related to that, something fun, interesting, something that their peers won't have that experience. I don't know, coming to Albania and meeting with high business people, whatever it is, but a special experience. And the third is development, personal development, professional internship, and so they feel that, quote unquote, they're not wasting their time. And those are the 3 things that if you have them in a good program and the program is run properly and manages to touch on those 3 points, I think there's a good chance for it to succeed. And my last point, and with that I conclude, is that the big, big challenge of all these programs is what happens the day after. Because Birthright is an amazing program. But if on day 12, or a month later, or 6 months later, or a year later, you're not still actively engaging these people, then all the effort is gone to waste. And that is the big challenge of what you do with that group of people after you've run the program. And there's a lot to be said about that as well. And with that, I'll conclude, Martin. I hope I didn't take too much time.
No, you're fine, my friend. It's fascinating. And we have a lot of questions coming in. So we'll come back and we'll bring all the questions together because I think all speakers can address it. But, you know, Mike, your words on a little bit of self-interest reminds me of a great line by a former Australian politician. And he said, in the great race of life, back self-interest, because at least you know it's trying.
Absolutely.
So look, on that note, Vartan, I'll hand over to you and we can shift to the Armenian experience, and the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be a panelist here, and it was a very interesting presentation by Mike. So I will continue. I'll try to be short. So I was born in Armenia, but spent most of my life outside of the country. I lived for almost 30 years in Russia, moved back 12 years ago to Armenia. I'm a co-founder and executive director of Repat Armenia Foundation, which primarily focuses on repatriation. So let me provide you some, just a second. Yeah, here we are. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Okay, so Armenia's case is quite interesting because we are one of the kind of classical diasporas or traditional diasporas. So 3 out of 4, well, if we exclude the moderator, then 3 out of 4 are the part of that type of diasporas. So our case is because we have diaspora for over 20 centuries. We have 1 million people living in Armenia, 8 million people living outside of Armenia in more than 100 countries. We have new diaspora, which has been formed after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and we have traditional communities. There are interesting migration processes, not only from Armenia to traditional diasporan communities, Armenian communities, to emerging communities. In terms of religion, most of us are Apostolic Armenian Christians, but also we have Catholics, Orthodox, Protestants. We have also Muslim Armenians, those who were converted after the genocide or during the genocide in the 20th century. So we have a big number of only English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Russian-speaking Armenians, which is a big problem as well in terms of outreach. We have a big set of organizations, like 30,000 organizations and networks, 1,000 schools worldwide, 200 churches, 200 media. But the key challenges is that today in current world, traditional organizations and ways of working with the and engage less than 30% of the diaspora. Armenian identity becomes very complex, and because of the mixed marriages, because of the identity developments in general in the world. And we have an issue that many Armenians are not really connected with homeland, with Armenia. So from that point of view, Armenian experience is very interesting to explore from the point of do's and don'ts. So when I was still working in and living in Russia and in young diasporan organizations, we formed these 3 circles when we were trying to understand what would be the most important things to focus on while living outside of the country. So basically there are 3 circles, which is ethnic or national identity. So these are, we can talk about those things in details today. The second is integration with the host country, but also integration in the diaspora and as a part of the world Armenian diaspora. And the third is professional. And for us, it was clear that we need to have a balance in terms of development on 3 of those. And the best thing is actually intersection of 3 circles. So the best Armenian would be the one which has country where he lives in. He is very professional and experienced and successful, and at the same time he clearly understands what does it mean to be Armenian and what does it mean to be connected with Armenia as a part of his identity. If we look at engagement ways, so these are the 3 major levels, which are divided by the level of impact and risk. So the lowest are tourism, remittances, and charity. Medium level of impact and risk is investments and export promotion, innovations and skills transfer. And the most complicated and the most influential engagement ways are lobbying and international influence, institutional development when diaspora becomes a part of the refugee and repatriation or physical move to the country. And the key 2 elements which help countries and nations to be successful here is the level of trust, which is very easy to lose but very difficult to develop, and the delegation of power. So the real readiness of the national authorities to share with the diaspora with the political and economic power, because without of this, it will be a lot of imitation and the results will be much less than from the optimal. So if we look at the relations between the state and the diaspora, so it's a permanent investment cycle where diaspora, where state ideally would invest care and love, and also care and love means mostly about education, preserving or developing identity, helping with the security challenges, and taking care of the diaspora. At the same time, we'll have a investment from the diaspora in forms of investments, in forms of skills transfer, in forms of repatriation, and many other ways. So if one of these parts of the circle doesn't work properly, if it's only bottom-up or top-down policies, usually those from the optimal model of engagement. So coming from that experience, and in the previous one, I would like to mention that all what I'm saying primarily relates to youth, because youth really becomes the most important part of the most passionate, the most energetic, with the biggest potential. And the state should be very, very accurate in the way they work and interact and communicate with youth. Same with optimal institutional solutions. Those solutions depend very much on culture. But if you look at the key parameters, I would say that the best forms to develop relations with youth diaspora outside of the country would be public-private partnerships, with the state does projects with diaspora institutions or networks, and private grassroots organization. So these would be the best, but the most complicated ways of developing programs and moving them forward. In this case, I would say that youth is definitely playing a huge role in terms of impact in Armenia, both when we talk about diaspora or repatriates. And most of the second 20 to 30 years, the tempo in Armenia is quite low, but you will see that many repatriates become pioneers in different sectors. So I'll just mention several of the programs that might be of your interest in different sectors. The first is youth sports programs. So these programs are publicly financed and organized. The first is Pan-Armenian Games, which are organized starting from 1999. In 4 years, we have 10 sports disciplines, and a huge number of athletes from different countries come and participate in it. So the last one, it was before COVID in 2019. More than 6,000 athletes from 172 cities arrived, and it's a huge and great opportunity for youth in the country. The second is Aritun program. It's for youngsters from 13 to 18 years old. 2 weeks program of learning more about their identity, being connected with each other, because Armenians are coming from different countries, and the Russian Armenian dealing with American Armenian, Australian Armenian, or Iranian Armenian, and it's a great opportunity for them to learn more about the Armenian world, not only about Armenia as a country. So 1,000 participants per year are coming to Armenia. Youth and sports, I would also mention a couple of things which were developed by repatriates. The first is the Yerevan Marathon, which is a great format which allows both Armenians but also their friends to come to Armenia and run. Workout Armenia, which is also a physical and mass sports movement, which also engages tens of thousands of members in Armenia and the diaspora in the process. Sports definitely is one of the key elements which should, and it can engage many people. The second, professional engagement program. So it's Teach for Armenia, which is part of Teach for All, where young diasporans can come and teach in underprivileged outside of Yerevan, so in the regions. We have 120 teachers in more than 100 schools. 40,000 students are covered. So basically, it's 2 years of your professional life dedication to the process, which gives you a lot of positive engagement and attachment to the country, but also will definitely have a good step in your career development. Birthright Armenia, I won't touch. We have Sevan here, who's the executive director of Birthright Armenia. But it's definitely another you should consider. It differs from Birthright Israel. Another couple of programs are also quite interesting. The first is Igor's Fellowship Program, which provides an opportunity for diasporan professionals to come and work in public organization, public institutions in Armenia. It was launched 1 year ago, so we had 50 participants last year from 19 countries working in 18 ministries. Last year, it's a placement. This year, we have approximately the same number of people who have been enrolled in the process. Another one is AGBU's Global Leadership Program. AGBU is the biggest multilateral Armenian diasporan organization, which has more than 100 years history. The interesting thing about this program, which is a summer internship program, is that it's not only about bringing Armenians to Armenia from the diaspora, but it's also about bringing diaspora and Armenians from one community to another. So, for example, if you're a young Armenian from Russia, you can have internship in London, Paris, or Los Angeles, and vice versa, or Boston, right? And the program mentors and prominent host institutions, there's a big number of them, starting from Fortune 50 companies to public sector organizations. And many people who actually graduated from that program, they later on, when they become successful, they become hosts, they become mentors for young diasporans in future. I'll stop on this. It's Repat Armenia Foundation, the organization which I'm co-founder and director from the first day. We focus on high impact brain gain repatriation, but also promoting effective ways for diaspora's engagement in homeland. We've developed a big repatriates, more than 11,000 members are here. We have around 1,000 applications for repatriation and integration support. And I must confess that many people who mostly professionals, so we're talking 25 to 40 years old. And that's very promising for us because they are becoming a change maker in Armenia when they arrive, not only in terms of economy, but also in terms of societal development, culture, and many other elements. One more important format introduced to you, which is also part of international format. It's an Impact Hub, Yerevan, which has been opened in 2016, the first in the post-Soviet region. And basically, it's a co-working place with a very good tenants. Many of them are repatriates and diasporans. Now, after the COVID, maybe the only good thing about COVID is that it creates an opportunity for people to work remotely, to move their location. So it gives you an opportunity to think about where you want to live. And today, there are much bigger opportunities for people to live in a different country, but do the job for another country or company. So Impact Hub is exactly that type of a program that gives you an opportunity to relocate in the right place, do a good job, but work and live from Armenia. So Impact Hub has more than 100 participants from 10 countries living and working in Armenia, and connection with 100 Impact Hubs worldwide. That's it. I would come up with several recommendations, which are quite general, but basically the recommendations are as follows: that state-diaspora relations is a two-way road. It's very important to engage diaspora institutions and networks because now done by the diasporans, not through the formal organizations, but through the informal networks by interests and groups. So it's very important to engage them before the programs are developed and it's very important to make them co-owners of the process. Also, it's great to explore international experience on diaspora's engagement. For me, it was several years ago when I met 50 representatives of different diaspora, non-Armenian diaspora. And I could see that 70% of things are very close and very similar in terms of problems and solutions. 30% we are definitely all different. Yeah, and one more thing is actually you need to support your migrant you want to engage him when he becomes successful as a successful diaspora. So this is a very important rule, which I think that most of us, especially in the public sector institutions, should remember when we are developing policy. That type of projects. That's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Vartan. An incredibly rich and diverse array of work, and I think what it gets across for me is that when you engage young diaspora members with a sense of purpose, you begin to really unlock some interesting potential moving forward. So on that note, we hand over to Sevan, who lives this on a daily basis. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Martin, colleagues on the call, and our international audience, thank you for being with us and glad to share from our experiences. I'll start with a brief introduction and then talk more about the program and the experiences through the program. So Armenians in Armenia, it's one of the rare situations in the world where most of the ethnic people live outside of the borders of the home country, of the homeland, let's say. And that pretty much necessitates the extra effort of involving those who are living outside of the borders to the development and success of the country. And we are one of those cases. In the case of Birthright Armenia, we started back in 2004. Our first participants came at that time. We recognize that for Armenians who live outside of Armenia's borders, the diaspora, especially in the organized diaspora, the definition of Armenian identity, Armenian heritage, and the fulfillment of what that involves, what responsibilities that entails, can be done pretty much completely within the diaspora setting. And the country, in a way, became disenfranchised from the exercise of Armenian ethnic heritage. And that's the case, I would say, with not just Armenians exclusively, but with other other ethnic groups around the world. So it was very important for the diaspora to be engaged in Armenia to change the definition that people had. People went to Armenian school, people went to Armenian clubs, people had Armenian friends, people were in our Armenian community, they went to Armenian dance classes and so on. And they were the complete Armenian. But half of being Armenian was also, should have been, or still should be, the involvement and the real engagement with the home country, in this case, Armenia. So creating that redefinition of what it is to be Armenian, how to exercise, what are the options of exercising the Armenian identity beyond the 100 kilometers around your place of residence was an important challenge. And I think the concept of mental repatriation is something that we very much focus on. And I emphasize the word mental repatriation because the first step to any engagement is to see Armenia as an important part of your exercise of identity and heritage. And with Birthright Armenia, the program is designed specifically to make Armenia a real place, to move away from the concept of the romantic homeland, the mountains and the food and the nature and the songs and the culture and so on. Of course, all of those are definite parts of what Armenia is, but making Armenia a real place with all of its pluses and minuses, all of its beauties and all of its potential and all of its challenges was essential to being able to build relationships between individuals who were living outside of the country, were born and raised outside of the country in different cultures, and creating a practical relationship with this country throughout their lifetime. And Mike alluded to the challenge, the biggest challenge of what happens when you finish, participation in the program. And I think the way we have tried to design the program is not to focus on the program as being something that you do for 3 months or 6 months or up to 1 year, but what are you doing afterwards? This is a launch pad of building a relationship, starting an understanding of this country, which can be very different in many ways with the cultural norms of the countries where you are currently resident. So the core part of the experience is working, volunteering, interning with local organizations. We have over 1,000 partner organizations here in Armenia with which we are partnered. So our participant comes from a different country for a minimum of 2 months, up to 1 year. And they're basically working with Armenian co-workers, Armenian colleagues. They get introduced to the work culture, the work ethic, with all of the similarities and much more of the differences that people perceive from what they're used to. So again, it's a platform of integration and understanding. We offer language classes for those who don't speak the language. I'm sure a lot of Albanians as well living in different countries might not speak Albanian well or might not speak Albanian at all. About a third of our participants come to the program with either no knowledge of Armenian language or very, 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 very basic language, knowledge of Armenian language. So we have Armenian language classes for them. One of the key areas of our program is living with host families. We offer living with a local family. These are not Airbnbs. You cannot find them on booking.com. These are families in our network specifically adopted for the purposes of being the hospitable gateway to Armenian culture, Armenian traditions, Armenian way of living. Again, with all of its aspects, We don't give family scripts of what to say, what not to say. We want the relationships to be very, very genuine. Plus, we offer excursions, we offer lecture series, we do community service projects, and so on. So it's all about integration and making Armenia a real place, a place where they can, stomp their foot on, and there's grounding. The diaspora in existence, unfortunately, does not have that core grounding. it is grounded in the concept of I'm being an Armenian living in Beirut, I'm being an Armenian living in Los Angeles or in Paris, but without the component of that state centricism of exercising identity. There's something that's missing, and when that part is missing, that individual's practical engagement with Armenia for years down the road becomes that much more challenging. And as far as the experience post-volunteering, we call them our alumni. They're not former participants. They are our alumni, our current graduates. And we have a specific program area that specifically deals with them. We give them grants for projects, initiatives. We offer repatriation support in partnership with Repat Armenia. We offer them temporary lodging for when they come back for free of charge. So regardless of people wanting to repatriate physically at some point after volunteering, or they're thinking about doing initiatives and engagement projects in Armenia, a core program component is continuing to work with them and not saying, it was nice knowing you, have a nice life. So this is in a nutshell what.
Do you mind if I jump in? Because we just have kind of 3 or 4 minutes left, and I'd love to maybe just throw one of the questions to you that I think speaks a lot to what you want to do, because one of the big questions we have in the chat, for example, is across the panel, for the Albania project, what would you recommend not to do in the sense of moving forward? Because I'm just conscious of time squeezing in on us. I think it's important to try and address the questions if we can. Thank you, Sevan.
I think it's very important to be very flexible as the program is being designed. The program that we had initially and the program that we have now are very drastically different. Get everyone involved in the diasporan communities. You might have different groups, different organizations. Everyone has to be involved. It has to be a pan-national organization. You cannot serve this community but not that community. This religious sect but not that religious direction. It has to be all inclusive. Everyone has to participate.
Sevan. Mike, Vartan, would you like to jump in on that? Sorry to cut across, Sevan. I'm just conscious of the time squeezing out on us.
Well, listen, first of all, time flies when you're having fun, and the presentations were excellent. I also learned a lot. I hope you can hear me. First of all, I'll just say that we're about to run out of time, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach me at mike@thepracticalfundraiser.com. The Practical Fundraiser. That's my consultancy. You can drop me an email, and I'll be happy to reply following the session. The one thing I have to say is that, and I think we all agree on it, think about the day after before you start the program. Think about what you will do following the successful program that you run to make sure the engagement is long-term. And it's a very, very daunting challenge. There are ways of dealing with it. But that, I would say, is the major piece of advice, because otherwise you not only waste the resources of the program that you ran, but you also disappoint the participants.
Vartan?
Just very quickly, it's about listening skills. Dealing with diaspora is more about listening more than talking. But usually, because we are too emotional, and diaspora is an emotional animal, we need to learn how to listen. The feedback, as Sarah said, and like I said, you need permanently to adjust the program. That's important. You also need to work more on soft landing, on bringing on prejudices, on expectations, because the more realistic expectations people have when they move to the country or they start participating in the programs, the better it is for them. And you definitely need to think about the next steps. So from Birthright Armenia, for example, or any similar program, or the Albanian program, which has been launched, and I wish all the success. you need to think what you introduce to them, what's next. Because if you don't introduce something next, ideally you need to have the whole cycle for kids from the diaspora, starting from the age of 12 years old or even earlier, and to the age of people who are retiring. And in every cycle, if you work for example, 20 to 32 years old, you need first to think how you engage people and how you influence on their identity and priorities earlier age, and what you do with people after 32 when they graduate from the program. Basically, it also becomes a part of your mission and programs to think about before and after. In this case, it will be successful. It's difficult. It's not easy, but it's important to have this kind of a mindset when you work on programs.
Thank you, Vartan. And they've let us know in the chat we can stay for another 5 minutes. We're not getting kicked out yet. so we can address another couple of questions. Because Sevan, I'd love to come back to you because you were kind of mid-flow in the sense of the programs and the initiatives that you put together. And maybe just to contextualize it, one of the questions we got in the chat as well is, essentially, what's the role of government here? How important are they to help you in implementing that, and you've kind of, you gave a very provocative and emotional sense of rooting it in that sense of connection physically to the country. And it's something we've seen in Ireland. Many generations of the Irish diaspora still think of Ireland as the land of leprechauns and people running around with pots of gold. But we want them to think about the Ireland that has Google and Facebook and Twitter and the headquarters of those companies. So that sense of the role of government being supportive, or what does that look like for you folks?
Well, in our case, fortunately, our founder, Edin Hovnanian, and her family foundation takes care of the entire financial part of our organization, because we pay for participants' costs, airplane tickets, and so on. So fortunately, the financial part is covered. From the government, we have collaborations in different sectors because we have participants that work in the government sector. We want the government to be open to intaking participants, to also the ministries and other government agencies, to see the workings of the government from all aspects and all sides. So as long as in reality governments don't interfere and don't make difficult our operation or similar operations, I think that's the best thing that we can also look for.
Any reflections from the panel on that question? Because another question we got from Mark Cosmo, and it was the first question: who finances these things? So I think it's important to really think about the developer of development. Who's that investor? So thank you for sharing that, Sevan. And Mike, the question was to the Birthright program in Israel as well. So from my understanding, that was a philanthropic investment from two people in the community, correct?
So listen, the financing, this also relates to the issue of government, is that the finance has to be, I believe, based on three different elements. One is the government, and I'm glad to hear that Birthright Armenia is funded purely by philanthropy, but I believe government should be involved in financing it, as long as it doesn't turn it into a political enterprise. Politics in diaspora are always a bad mix. So funding has to come from government, has to come from philanthropy, and I also believe it should come from the community itself and even from the participants. So the balance between the four depends a lot on the type of diaspora, on where people are coming from, on the relationship they have with the government, on the sort of infrastructure they have locally. But if you create that balance, the community itself and the participants, then you can find a good way to finance it. And I think another role of government, as Sevan has said, is to create some sort of open door policy where young people from the diaspora can experience the best of the best the country has to offer. Again, steering away from politics, and it's not easy, I know. But if we open all the doors possible for these young people to have the most amazing experience, government can help with that as well.
Perfect. So I want to close with a huge thank you to Sevan, Mike, Vartan. I've learned a lot. page is full of notes, so I'm going to the Irish government next week. But I want to close with a well done and thank you to Kermit and the launch of the program. We wish you all the best from Ireland to Armenia, Israel. Go forth, prosper. Take care, folks.
Thank you, and have a Merry Christmas and a great year.
Thanks, folks.
Good luck to everyone. Stay safe.